Hi guys, and welcome to this part 2 on this little series on how to do an effective smart repair. Now if you haven't watched part 1, I suggest you go back and watch part 1, because 90% of the fundamentals of how to do an effective smart repair are actually in part 1. In part 2 we're going to run through the paintwork side of things, how to put your base down, how to put your clear coat down, and then how to flat and polish everything to make sure the job looks right at the end. But for now, we're just going to jump straight in and get into the actual paintwork side. Now, I'm using the same base that I painted this wing up when I actually did this test panel. So obviously, for the colour matching side, I'm not had to worry too much. But if you were going to do this job on a car or something like that, and obviously the wing would be butted up against the bonnet, you might be doing it in a different area and it would be butted up against the corner. The one thing to make sure is you really do need to make sure that you get a really good colour match, and spend the time making sure that your colour is spot on before you try and do a little blow in like this that is butt up to another panel. Now some colours would be easier than others for that, but it really is down to how good your colour match is as to whether you can get away with doing a little job like this. Now I'm using the little Sartor 3000B that we've used for the rest of the job. It's a great little gun for this sort of thing. You can turn the fan down really nice and fine and just focus on the area that you physically want to colour up to start. Now we want to get this repair area coloured up. We know all the sanding scratches and everything around there have all been taken out, so it's a real nice fine smooth finish. So we just want to concentrate on keeping this little bit of paintwork and this little bit of repair as local as we can to that repair. We don't want to go too far down and start touching that tape. We don't want to go too far back or too far forward, because then we're going to get into the realms of where we want to do our clear coat blends. So as we've said before, with the rest of this job you want to make sure that you are just working on the small area that you basically want to work on at the time, keeping this repair as small as possible. Now you will notice here that I'm just using the air pressure from the spray gun just to flash this off before I put the next coats down. Now with this being a smart repair, and obviously some of you guys are DIY guys, some of you guys are hobby guys, some of you guys may be looking into getting into smart repairs, and you may end up doing some of these jobs in this kind of environment rather than a perfect spray booth environment, which is why I've done this one like this, so you guys can see a little bit more of a job that's been done in a way that you might be able to do it yourself rather than us doing it in, you know, a brand new spray booth or with really high-end gear or anything like that. I've tried to do it in a way that would be easy for you guys to look at and to learn from, and also, you know, that you guys can relate to. This job will come out with a bit of crap in it. This job will need a bit of flat and polishing and a bit of nibbing. You know, it's kind of like a bit of a no holes barred video, a bit different to what we normally do, but it gives you guys a little bit more of an insight into what we're doing and how you can do it as well as how we do it. Now the base coat, I've got that area coloured up, I've given it a light blend out. I'm just going to use the heat lamp again, same as in the first video. It's the Fast Mover Tools heat lamp, and the digital timer on this is brilliant. It means I can set that timer out, stick that on for 5 minutes, go away, mix my clear coat, and now I'm back, clear coat mixed, and we're ready to put some clear down on this wing and get it ready so we can lamp it off and get it ready for polishing. So again, as I said in the first video, we are sticking to the same spray gun for all 3 stages on this job. We've used it for the primer, the base coat, and now we're going to use it for the clear coat. Now same as any job, I'm just going to give that a light tack off. Obviously with this being in the open air as well, it will get a bit of dust and a bit of crap in it, so no matter what your job, try and tack it off regularly, try and keep that surface as clean as possible. Now this clear coat, I have mixed this with a bit of extra thinners because I want this to go down nice and smooth, nice and flat, and especially I want to try and get these little blend edges on that front there and obviously at the back a little bit flatter than we usually would try, because I can't put it on as heavy to get the finish, because I need that blend edge there. When I hit that with fade out thinners, I need that to be nice and smooth. Now on your first coat you want a nice close coat, on your second coat you want a nice close coat. We're not so much going for finish, We just want really a bit of a nice smooth finish that's got good coverage and good build, so we can polish this up. Now, areas on this that you need to be careful of obviously are your clear blend areas. You don't want to paint right up to the solid edge of the tape at this end and at the other far end, where we've put the bit of a false edge along the bottom edge of that wing. We can paint right up to that without any issues. Now, this is the false edge now that we're taking off, and also I'm going to take off this piece at the end, which, if you watch video 1, was the section that I said I have actually prepped this panel up that little bit extra there with the 3000 Trizac, so we've got a bit of room now that we can spray our fade out thinners over. Now, all I've done is rinse the gun out, popped a little bit of fade out thinners in there. There's no reason to really wash the gun out solidly. You can just tip your clear out and tip your fade out thinners in. Just spray a tiny little bit out and then start applying your fade out thinners to those little clear blend areas. Now, you want to do this nice and carefully in light, fine, gentle coats, and then in between use the air from your spray gun to actually flash this off, because the fade out thinners itself will be melting that new clear and old clear to blend the two together, so it ends up as one continuous piece of paint really. And obviously, because it's melting the new paint as well as the old paint, and obviously the new paint that we just put down is still wet and fresh, there is a chance that if you put it down too heavy and you don't dry it with the air from the spray gun, that it could run. Now you can see there that that area now is nicely blended in. It has along the bottom edge, which I know obviously you can't see too well because of the camera angle, and down at the front edge as well. Now, once you're happy that that looks right, then I'd give it 10 to 15 minutes to flash off before you apply any heat or try and do anything else to this panel. You need to let the solvents out of this breathe, let some of those thinners evaporate, and let this paint start to cure on its own before you add heat. If you start adding heat too soon, there is a risk of solvent boil and solvent pop and stuff like that, and you can actually end up damaging the paint and the paint surface. And the problem is, if you do that, then you could damage it that much that there is no going back. Now, I've set this timer for 20 minutes on this job because this is a repair lacquer rather than the normal kind of 2K lacquer that we'd normally use. It's actually a proper lacquer that's made for doing these sort of little spot repairs. Now, as we said in video 1, any time that you use the infrared lamp, you need to make sure that once you've put it on for the right amount of time for your product or material to cure, that you do let it come down to room temperature. Now, we're going to get into the actual flat and polishing stage on this now, and there's not really anything different that I would do on this compared to a normal job, but I thought I'd keep this footage in so you guys can see this whole job from start of putting the dent in the panel to the very end where the panel is polished up and finished. So all we're using is the 3M Microfine P2000 wet and dry. We're going to give this a really good wet and dry over the whole surface of this wing. Now, obviously we didn't do this in a perfect environment, we didn't do it in the booth. We're trying to keep this something that's a bit more relatable to some of you viewers out there that actually wanted this footage, that maybe trying to touch your car up at home or something like that. I know one guy said that he was going to try and do it with rattle cans, and at the end of the day, all the methods can be used, whether you're using a spray gun or a rattle can or anything like that. Obviously, being a painter for the amount of time that I have, rattle cans aren't sort of something that we really like to use, but I know some of you guys out there will be substituting rattle cans for the spray guns that we're using, which obviously is each to their own. It's whatever budget and whatever you've got available to you at home or in your shop or wherever you may be doing it. So we've just done that little bit at the front there. Obviously we got this little bit here where we had the soft edge on there and the false edge. We're just going to give that a tiny bit of a wet flat just to make sure that if there's any of the paint surface that's uneven or anything like that, or if there was any tiny little bit of build up, that any of that does come out, so that this whole surface now is nice and smooth and uniform to the rest of the paint on the panel, which is one of the trickier parts when you're doing a smart repair, and is also why I'm not wet flatting this with a block. I find if you wet flat by hand without a block, you will keep some of the peel in the paint, which does help with jobs like this, where obviously if you mirrored this section here and the rest of it had that nice factory peel, then you would end up with the problem that you're going to end up with a mirrored patch on a wing compared to the rest of it, which had that little bit of peel to it. But as far as the job goes, it really is just a good simple wet flat, making sure that you go over the whole area nice and even, and bring this paint finish down to a level that you're happy with it. Don't be scared of wet flatting your clear blends, as long as you've used that fade out thinners properly and you've melted those two, the new and the old together, and everything's nice and uniform there, you won't have any issues as far as wet flatting there. You can wet flat that down, because maybe you put it on a bit too heavy and that blend is still a little bit rough. You can just go across that with that 2000, smooth that out that little bit, and then when you Trizac it, polish it again. As long as you've put that fade out thinners down right, that will polish out fine, and you will not see any join where the new and the old meet or anything like that. So as with any job, we're going to make sure that we keep it clean and that we double check everything as we go along. So now I'm at a stage where I think I'm happy that I've wet flat the top of this wing enough. I'm just using a clean microfiber. I'm gonna wipe that down and then just use the airline just to quickly blow that off and dry that down so I can see what it looks like. Now at first glance everything looks alright. You can see there where we've wet flat out the blends just to make sure they're smooth into the panel, and obviously you can see that little bit underneath the style line that I've done, again just to make sure that's that little bit of a blend's polished out. Now as I said before, not being a perfect job, there is a few little nibs in this panel, so I'm just going along now, just double checking where those little bits of high nibs are. Go across to that 2000, just give them that little bit of an extra wet flat just to make sure that they're knocked down to the same height as the rest of the paintwork, so that when this is polished up, none of those little dirt nibs are going to stand out. Now on any colour panel, if you do get any dirt nibs in them, as long as they're not a different colour to what your panel is, then you're not going to end up with any sort of issues showing through with specks of a different colour or anything like that. Some of it's just dust that leaves that little bit of a high spot in the actual paint surface. Now on a job like this, where we've done these little blends, I'm just taking the P3000 Trizac by hand and just rubbing under this style line, because it's not an area that I'm going to be able to get to very well with the DA when I come to wet flat the rest of it down with the Trizac disc. So it's just a bit of good practice really. If you can't get in there with the DA, or maybe if you can get in there with the DA but you're going to risk putting a lot of pressure, say on some of the style lines like the arch or something like that, obviously you don't want to rub through or damage the paint on an area of the panel that we don't really want to work, then just do it by hand, take that little bit of extra time and that little bit of extra care. Now when it comes to the actual Trizacing, don't Trizac it any different to what you would a usual wet flat panel. Give it a good Trizac over, make sure you take the time to go over each area a few times, making sure that all those 2000 marks and all those scratches from where we've wet flat it, that all those are out, and we've taken this down to a nice satin finish with this 3000, so it'll polish up quite easily and quite nicely, and we won't end up with any imperfections in the paint surface when we're done. Now with this being a freshly painted test panel, you could say this is a bit like doing a wing on a new car, so we want to make sure that when we're done, this section not only matches for paint finish, i.e. mirror versus peel, but also the gloss level as well. We don't want this being a different gloss level to the rest of the wing. Now as you can see, we're just double checking again, cleaned it down after Trizacing it, give it a blow off with the airline. Just use that airline just to dry that water off. Give it a good visual inspection to make sure that everything looks right, and you know, at each stage check everything, make sure that in your mind you're happy with where it's at before you continue forward onto the next stage. So after a quick double check, I'm quite happy with where this panel's at, so we're going to get on to actually polishing the clear coat. Now you guys will know that I do use a separate compound for clear coat to what I do to a direct gloss. Now for clear coat I like the G3 Premium. I think it leaves a really nice finish. It's quite effortless to polish the clear coat up, and I find that even if it's an MS, a HS, an anti-scratch or something like this, repair lacquer, everything with this polishes up really well and really nice, and I've never really had any drop back with it or anything like that with polishing it up with a 1500 and a 3000 and then the compound, or whether you do it with the 2000, 3000 on a compound. I've always found that it does come up really well. One thing that I would advise is that you make sure you use the Freckler yellow head with it. It's not quite as hard as your conventional compounding head, but this compound really does not need like one of the white really hard heads to cut it up, although it doesn't feel really coarse. If you rub it between your fingers, it is quite a coarse compound, but at the same time it does stay nice and liquid and nice and wet whilst you're doing the job. So as any standard job, all I've really done is put a couple of oversized P blobs on the wing, and then I'm working my way along the panel and just polishing up nice and evenly and nice and steadily. One thing that I'd recommend for this really is polish up a bit like your spray. Work in sections across the wing, giving it a nice overlap on each pass with your polisher, just making sure that everything's nice and even and everything's nice and uniform, so you know that when you're done, really every section that you've done should be as polished or as unpolished as the next. So if you knock this off with a microfiber and it looks a bit dull, the whole thing really should look a bit dull. And if you knock it off with a microfiber and it's nicely polished up, then the whole thing should look nicely polished up. Now, I have been asked before in videos how I get into those little tight areas on panels, and obviously like in door jambs and stuff like that, because you can't get that big mop in there. The big mop's got a 6-inch mop head on it, so for a little area like this where you need to be careful, I've got this little 3-inch Sealy polisher. It's only a little cheap and cheerful thing, it's nothing expensive whatsoever. I'm using one of the little 3M medium heads on this. It's not soft, it's not hard, it's a nice medium foam head, and I say it's the closest one that actually matches the Freckler one that comes in the G3 Advanced Premium system. And again, exactly the same with this, just any of them areas that you couldn't get with the big mop head, or that you were a little bit too worried to try and get into with the big mop head, you can then use this little 3-inch 75mm polisher. Just feather the trigger so it's going as fast or as slow as you want, and get into those little areas and just polish up those little tight gaps and those little bits and pieces that you couldn't. Now, as with any job, you've done the compounding stage, so now you want to use a bit of a fine compound / polish over the top, kind of a bit of finishing glaze really, just to make sure that this panel is all nice, and obviously there's no holograms or anything like that from where we've just polished up. So what I'm going to do now that I'm happy that the compounding stage is done, I'm using the Quartz 2000 grade finishing glaze / compound. It's quite a fine glaze compound sort of polish really. It'll just take out any of them little hologram marks, any tiny little bits, and any of the edges or anything like that we've missed, and leave this panel a really nice gloss. And that really is the final stage for this smart repair. Now at the end of the video, as in all the videos, I have left some pictures of the finished article so you guys can see just how well this wing's come up, and we will take a bit of a closer look at it with the camera in a second when we knock this polish off. Now if there is any other videos or any content that you guys want to see us get up. This video, the part 1 of this video, did climb quite high in the views within the first sort of 20-24 hours. It was quite mad actually, quite how fast the view count went up on this. But I know a lot of you guys have been asking for my way of how I would do a smart repair. So if there's anything else like this that you want to see, that we can break down for you into the separate steps and try and keep it to a few longer videos rather than a lot of shorter videos, then don't hesitate to let us know. And obviously any input you guys have got about what you want to see, any of the processes, any of the materials or tooling or anything like that, do get in touch. Don't forget, leave a comment, and we'll always get back to you. Sometimes it takes a bit of time, but we're always trying to answer every comment that you guys leave on the videos and on the channel. Whether it be one of the older videos or one of the newer videos, we will always try and get back and answer the questions the best we can for you guys. So I hope you have enjoyed this video and all the information that we've put into this and the one before it. This is coming to about the end of this one now. We're just going to give this a quick knock off, and then I'm going to leave you guys with the finished article. But as you can see, this panel has come up absolutely spot on. There is no problems with any of the clear blends, as you can see there. Everything's gone in really nice and really even, and I have to say, even though it was a test panel, I was quite happy with this job. If it had been a customer's car, I'd have been quite happy to send that out the door. So once again guys, thanks for watching, thanks for tuning in, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget, hit that like button and hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you again soon for the next video.
Yeah.